Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. One of the backers of the World Below campaign on Backer Kits came up to me with a question. How do I handle problem players in a considerate way? I thought, this is simple. Communication. There you go, video done. But it is sometimes more complicated than that. Sometimes you need to get into the guts of the thing. Sometimes you have to handle hurt feelings. And not everyone comes prepared immediately to do that. Hell, sometimes I struggle with it. In and out of the gaming world, it can be difficult to deal with people whose emotions are heightened. Hell, your emotions may be heightened as well. And so they wanted me to make this video about how to handle problem players or problem incidents at the table. And while communication is the key, there are various tools and scenarios we can go through. So first things first, I consider most problem players La Sombra. I don't even mean always in Vampire the Masquerade games. It's just been in my history, and this isn't to say every single La Sombra player is an asshole, but in my history of gaming, almost every problem player I've ever encountered in Vampire has played a La Sombra or a Tremere, but usually a La Sombra. There's a reason for this. La Sombra are a facilitator clan for people who want to play bullies, social Darwinists, characters who like victory at all costs, and individuals who prefer to bludgeon their way forward with potence instead of use subtle methods, control their way through dominate rather than using subtle methods, and fucking hell, they're edgy, they can control shadows. So La Sombra have a certain place in the Vampire the Masquerade metaplot where I think they attract some problem players. All that said, that doesn't mean all La Sombra players are bullies, but I consider most problem players La Sombra. So let's talk about our La Sombra, shall we, in a few examples here. Let's take the really low-key example where our La Sombra keeps talking over some of the quieter, the Nosferatu and the Gangrel at the table. A few times now in this session of the Chronicle, the La Sombra player keeps walking over people's lines, essentially, taking their actions for them. Maybe they're impatient, maybe they think they've just got excellent ideas, maybe they think that the quieter players need help. You've noticed it, you can see the quieter players are getting a bit uncomfortable, maybe even one of them's messaged you. I mean, if one of them messages you or tells you quietly that this is what is going on, or even loudly that this is what's going on, that's when you definitely need to address it. But we're also half relying on you being a good mind reader, empath, as a GM. Sidebar, the idea is relatively recent that the players need to put in as much effort as the GM. I agree to an extent, but I also feel like taking on the mantle of GM does convey a certain responsibility for the table that players do not have, and that includes, quite often, settling or raising disputes like this to be settled. So, let's go back to our scenario. We're an hour into the game, we decide to take a break, because an hour is a good part. I mean, you can manufacture any reason to take a break in a game. I need a drink, I need a bio break, whatever. It's best to not address the issue head-on unless someone has raised it head-on. But during that break, you speak to La Sombra player and say, hey, I noticed you keep talking over Gangrel and Nosferatu. No, that's fine, I understand you have come up with some fantastic ideas, but I think they're feeling a bit marginalised or spoken over. I don't suppose you could let them take some of the spotlight in the next hour or so. Most players, even most La Sombra at that point are going to say, yeah, that's fine. Cool, done, problem solved. Communication, it's the key. But there will be other cases where the La Sombra says, well, no, look, the reason I keep talking is because we're just going to be sat around doing nothing if we wait for Nosferatu and Gangrel. You say, I understand, I know you want to move the story forward, I know you've got great ideas, you always put them in play, but all of us are playing, all of them are playing, they're not always going to want you to take charge. Now, if they say they want you to take charge, maybe they want you to be squad leader, or they want you to be the coterie head, or whatever, The we'll say the El Capitan Vampiro. Let's say they want you to be that, the Generalissimo. We could keep going on. Then great, but you should still tend to ask them for advice. There will be occasions where your character will decide to do something without consulting other than that's fine if it's in character, but there will be other times when as a player you want to show courtesy to the other players. And again, the player will probably say, yeah, completely right, I'll give it my best. Call me up on it if I make an issue like this before, again, rather. And there will be other cases where, you know what, this group isn't for me. You're all too sensitive. You should be letting me have the spotlight, says the La Sombra. They flounce out with their duster and katana and shades on, and they go off to manipulate shadows with a bottle of lotion. Now, that takes us on to the next point. Sometimes there will be bad fits. Sometimes players will not be able to work together, even with mediation, even with communication, even with breaking down the subject. Ultimately, there can be personality clashes, there can be desire clashes. I've sometimes seen it, not as much recently, but I used to see it where you had a lot of miniatures gamers getting into gaming versus people who got in purely through tabletop. The miniatures gamers tended toward victory at all costs. They tended toward operation-based play, what would now be considered Blades in the Dark considered play, but games like Slay Industries, Warhammer 40k, even Conspiracy X, you're given a briefing, you're given a scenario, this is what you've got to do and this is how you're going to accomplish it. Whereas these players tended to like to muddle their way through, tripping over their own characters and NPCs and so on to get there, and sometimes there could be a clash because these ones were quite happy spinning in a circle, these ones wanted to go like that. And so sometimes those people just didn't play well together. And you should be able to acknowledge that because life is short, games are even shorter, and there's no point playing with people you're not enjoying playing with. Yes, it can disrupt a game, but if the game is stressful, you shouldn't be playing it. Now, let's crank up the dial a little. Let's say La Sombra is now a rules lawyer. Let's say that La Sombra keeps talking over you, keeps talking over the other players, keeps correcting them, most importantly. This isn't how it works. You need to spend 1 blood point for that discipline. Or, no. Extended action wouldn't work. It's a complex action. Whatever. The La Sombra keeps butting in. It's an interruption game again, but this time it's with a sense of knowing. It's a sense of authority. I know better than the storyteller. Again, you find the natural breaking point. You speak to the La Sombra. Hey, I know you know this game really well. I'm still learning it, and the best way for me to learn is to actually go through it myself. I know that means things will slow down occasionally. But I tell you what, when I need help, I will absolutely ask you for it because I know you know your stuff. Again, most La Sombra will say, cool, boss, and back to the gaming table. Others will say, yeah, but I know the rules. If I can help you, why don't I just offer? Or if I can help the player, why don't I just offer? To which you say, because it sounds like you're running the game when you do that, and it's a little undermining. And I'm not saying you're deliberately undermining me, but as storyteller, I need to have those rules together, and where I don't have them together, I need to learn them, and that's when I need to ask. But if you wade in constantly with your rule instructions to everyone else, people are going to defer to you, and that's fine if that's what I want, but I'm the person running the game. So I prefer it goes this way for now. Again, most La Sombra, that may be a bit of a controversial way of handling it, but I think, especially with rules lawyer La Sombra, you need to handle it in a specific way. A lot of people, when they're rules lawyers, don't see it as a problem. They think they're helping, and to an extent they are. But there is a social aspect, the social contract aspect, where if you have someone who is always acting as authority, it can make other people feel low. And that's what they need to understand. And again, they might say, oh, fuck you, you're too sensitive, and flounce off again. Or they might say, you know what, that's fine. I will mention rules when you ask. And the likelihood is you will ask them, because this player is very good at that kind of thing. And you know what, they will appreciate being asked. So let's crank it up a little more. Let's talk about actual personality clashes. Because this is where the gaming groups really break down. I mentioned, sometimes gaming groups have to split up. It isn't always miniatures versus narrative. Sometimes it's this person has been an asshole to this person. Or this person doesn't like this person's political views. Or this person's political views are disgusting and no one likes them. It could be this person is a bigot, this person, maybe this person keeps veering off the topic in the game. It could be something that seems mild like that. A player, for instance, let's say Ventru, keeps talking about their D&D game during the course of the game. Maybe they keep talking about their character from D&D instead of focusing on the chronicle they're supposed to be playing. There's lots of reasons that players may end up coming into a personality clash. We've ramped up from simple impoliteness to, okay, these people don't get on. What you've got to decide then, and again, this might not be, or this might be a controversial view, there will be some people who say, well, you need to mediate every single situation. You need to get the people in a room, you need to talk to them, what are your problems? Let's talk them out. And sometimes that talking method, the communication method, can work. Sometimes you will improve everyone's lives, everyone's gaming experiences by hashing out your issues in a non-confrontational way. You say, so a few people have got a problem with the way you've been addressing some of the female characters in this game. You're calling all of them whores and sluts and trying to fuck everything that moves. This is a game of My Little Pony. Well, it's making people uncomfortable. It's just what my character would do, says the player. Yeah, I get that, but you have the ability to make your character do other things. If the other players aren't enjoying you doing that, this is in part a spectator sport. When you're not playing, you're watching the other people play. I don't have to, I can just read the book. Well, in that case, you should probably not play with this group, because this is a game where we're all supposed to be playing with each other, not just on our own in a group. Yeah, well, fine. So can you stop being such a misogynistic character? And this is the real test, I think. Because when you start throwing terms like misogynistic or bigoted or prejudiced around, or racist or anti-Semitic, there will be some players who have a dawning moment who think, shit, I have been doing that, haven't I? And they'll say, look, I'm so sorry, weren't over the top. I was being... That was stupid of me. I'll apologise to the group, we can get back to playing, and I won't do it again. And those players are like gold dust. It's wonderful to encounter players who can learn. But there are also players who will say, fuck off, that's my view. You can't tell me what to think. If I want to come to the table like this, I don't want to be thinking about politics. I think about politics all day. I come to the gaming table to disengage from politics. Those kinds of players. I get it. I get wanting to disengage from the real world. But if people bring hate speech or hate thoughts or things that make people uncomfortable to the table and aren't prepared to moderate that in polite company, it's the old question, would you go to your church and call the priest a cunt? Would you go to your family dinner and rip a loud one at the table and maybe soil yourself? Probably not. But if you would, you're also the same kind of person who at a table would start throwing N-words around and generally being a disruptive, unpleasant element. At that point, if you're unapologetic for it, I think it's the storyteller, the GM, the story guide's job and the player's job to say, look, I don't think this is a good personality fit. I suggest finding a different group. We'll carry on without you. Thanks. Most players at that point, unfortunately, will flounce off duster, katana, hand gel. Some will show an effort, but they'll largely be bitter about it and they will make snide remarks. Well, I can't say that anymore. In all those cases, you just need to give your best goodbye and separate. Fact of the matter is this. conflict, while a natural part of our lives, does not have to exist at the tabletop. And it doesn't have to exist in any social situation, far from it. What you can actually do if you are not getting on with someone is, rather than trying to talk it over, if you feel like, well, this is going to be hanging over me forever, this is going to be causing me stress, or this is going to be causing me anxiety, or the people have already expressed they don't want to play with this person, just cut the cord. Just move on. And I appreciate I'm saying this from a position where I have lots of gaming groups and I can, but no gaming is better than bad gaming. And there are so many different online games with so many different groups now that you would find it very easy to move to another group if you do not fit in with this one, or if you don't like that player in particular. I know that's not the answer people want, run away, but sometimes the best way of avoiding conflict is to get out yourself. Don't expect the enemy to run. Just say, you know what, I'll find a different group. But if there's 4 of you who are in agreement and 1 person who isn't, that 1 person is gone. You ask them to leave. They are not invited anymore. I guess finally, and I appreciate this is as rambly as my videos always are, this is partly anecdotal, partly just, I guess, sage advice, things I've learned over time. One of the best things you can do is at the very start of gaming, at the very start of your campaign, is run through your checks. Run through the content people do not want to cover in this game. Run through the characters you are playing early on. Don't just introduce everyone blind, because if you introduce the characters early on, you can pick up on problematic elements. And I know people get very sensitive, ironically, about sensitivity in gaming these days. People think, well, I'm not sensitive. I'm double R. If you can't handle this, you shouldn't be gaming, and so on. I don't think that at all. I think there's a group for everyone. It's just sometimes the groups don't fit, and you can't necessarily change people, and you shouldn't always try. Rather than saying sensitivity, I like to use the word maturity. There is a maturity to the gaming contract, the social contract, the thing that you're embarking upon when you join a group. And that maturity tells you, much like it does if you're entering a romantic relationship or a friendship gone wrong or a job that you're not enjoying, know when to call it quits. Know when to fight your corner. And know when to discuss things on a calm and even level. And finally, know what's offensive and what's not. Because a lot of the time, these issues can be resolved if you discuss them up front, in a non-confrontational way. If someone says to you, you know what, I don't want any content in this to do with infanticide, I really don't want to see children die in the game, great! The storyteller does not have to involve that in the plot, and your characters do not all have to have lost their children in terrible accidents. It's easy. You do it up front. And if you've neglected to do it up front, you can do it in front of any session and set the precedent from there on. And if it comes up as an issue, then you discuss it in a non-confrontational way. I've got one last bit. Because I think, and I'm rather guessing from the backer of the world below, I know who this person is, they sign up to my Patreon. I know they had a clash with some players in the past. And this, to me, sounded like a personality conflict where there were a couple of players who were doing something in a game that... So we'll again say Nosferatu and Gangrel were doing things like wanting to blood bond members of the coterie and influence them into doing things. And Tremere over here did not appreciate that. Did not appreciate that one bit, because the only people who can blood bond are the Tremere. No, didn't appreciate that because didn't like their agency being taken away. Now, it may have been more nuanced than that, but what we see there is PvP, in a sense. PvP is one of those things that can be discussed up front or when it happens. It is not a bad thing to break immersion, to break from in character to say, player A, person playing the Nosferatu, I would really appreciate if you don't blood bond my character. I'm quite happy with you talking my character into doing what you want, but I don't want to lose control of my character. It's not something I'm comfortable with. Nosferatu player A might say, cool. And that's how it goes. Nosferatu player may say, well, no, because I would need you to do this thing. At which point, turn to the storyteller. Both of you, ideally. And the storyteller should say, why don't I introduce an NPC in a coming scene who can fulfill that role so that we're not reliant on a player being controlled by another player? Boom. Problem solved. And again, sometimes the players are going to think, you know what, I can't play with players who want to manipulate each other constantly, who want to essentially spike each other's drinks, who are going to be stabbing each other in the back. Some games are well suited to that, some parties are well suited to that, some player groups are well suited to that, and others aren't. And it gets back to the nub of it for me, which is, if the La Sombra in your coterie is not working out because he is an arse, you need to say to that La Sombra, I'm afraid, as storyteller or as a group, but ideally as a storyteller so they don't feel ganged up on. I really appreciate everything you brought to the game, but the rest of the players have had a chat with me and we don't really think that you're a good fit for the group. It's not a reflection on your personality. It's just, as a role player, we're looking for someone else. Weaselly words, maybe. Mealy-mouthed, maybe. But you've got to remember there's feelings at play here. And it's the same with any breakup. You need to think about the other person's feelings. You can't just say, fuck off. I mean, you can, but you can expect the same treatment at some point later on down the road. But yeah, you say to them, look, we've all had a chat about it, and we've already tried to overcome these issues, because hopefully you have. And now I think we just need to ask you to step aside, and this can be your last session, or you don't have to come to this last session if it's going to feel too awkward for you. That's it. That's it. Yeah, I'm a coward. My favourite method of conflict resolution is to divide the group, but I find it works. It works for me. And I know not everyone has the privilege to just end a group and find another one immediately, but I promise, you know, Onyx Path has gaming weekends. Every single month we have a gaming weekend at the end of the month over on Start Playing. That's where you can launch games, you can run games, you can play games, you can advertise your games. If you don't have a gaming group right now, do that via Start Playing, because there is a venue for you every single month. Go on the Onyx Path Discord, look for players. It's easy. It really is easier than you think. Anyway, long rambly video aside, Abyssals is still on Indiegogo right now, so please do back it if you like ghoulish, ghastly, gothic creations in the world of creation of Exalted. Abyssals is the RPG that is the Exalted type that is most influenced by Wraith the Oblivion. So if you're a big fan of Wraith the Oblivion, do check Abyssals out. You know, you've got your Death Lords, Death Knights, Underworld, Stygia, and so on presented in this as well. So do have a look. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.